Hey everyone, I'm Cary Smith and I'm sitting here with Cheri Turner.
Hi, everyone.
And we're both with Client First Capital. And so, Cheri, today we're talking about the retirement red zone
Mhm.
and how to avoid the critical mistakes as you near retirement. And so, as you might spend your entire career planning for retirement, and maybe mistakes that you made in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or maybe even early 50s, you can recover from those mistakes because you have
Right.
time. But
Mhm.
when you get to those last 5 to 10 years before you retire, it's important that you don't make, critical mistakes. And
Yes.
so, Cheri, you help people prepare for retirement all the
Mhm.
time. And so, why don't you lead us through some of the critical mistakes that people could make and
Sure.
how to avoid making those mistakes?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is just simply underestimating your retirement expenses. It's so important to really sit down and be sure that you're crafting and creating a full and complete budget, taking into consideration things like the impact of inflation. If you're still 5 or 10 years out, you don't want to estimate expenses based on what the cost is today. You need to ensure you're accounting for inflation. One very commonly overlooked expense or underestimated, I should say, is healthcare in retirement. But it's just really important to be sure that you're building in your needs as well as your wants, being very intentional around what you want your goals and plans to be throughout retirement, planning for any hobbies, travels, even things like gift giving. Sometimes people forget, if you have less to spend in retirement, well, maybe you can't lavish the grandkids at Christmas the same as you used to. So just going into it, really being very intentional around how you want that budget to look and starting with it realistically there and then making adjustments from that point.
Yeah, so sometimes people make the mistake also of I'm going to assume that when I retire, my expenses are going to go down, right?
Mhm.
And their logic may be I don't have to take clothes to the dry cleaners every week. I don't have to buy as
Right.
many suits or business clothes, or I'm not spending as much on gas because I'm not driving to work every day and commuting
Mhm.
and so forth. But then they retire and they find out, oh, but there's other things I do want to do and they cost money too. And so I didn't
Yeah.
account for that. So I counted for the expenses going down, but I didn't account for my other expenses
Right.
and recreational expenses going up. So that's one that I
Yes.
see, a mistake that I see people make as well. Okay, that's good.
Right. Right. So another important thing is in those latter years, really being very intentional around taking appropriate investment risk. Now, when I say appropriate, I say it that way because it could be too much or it could be too little. So, depending on what your retirement goals are, you may need a more aggressive growth plan in order to meet those objectives. However, as you approach closer and closer to those retirement years, you want to ensure that you are taking into account your risk tolerance, your risk capacity and ability to recover, and then your overall timeline. So with that, it's just really important to keep in mind that a portfolio that takes a 30% hit actually has to recover or have a gain of 43% just to get back to the starting point. So it's really a poor time to take a dip in your portfolio right before going into retirement. You want to ensure that your level of investment risk is appropriate during that time.
Yeah. So I think a key mistake people might make here, to your point, in managing risk, is it's they just assume if I'm properly allocated, I've got the right risk, right?
Right.
So if
Yeah.
I'm 60/40 in my allocation, then I've got the right risk. And the truth is, a lot of people might be allocated properly, but not really have a clear understanding of how much risk is really in their portfolio,
Hmm.
depending on other economic factors that could be increasing or decreasing risk. So, yeah, I think that's a key point.
Yes, definitely. Another area that sometimes people don't optimize is claiming Social Security too early. For a lot of individuals, if you have a life expectancy of lower to mid 80s, it actually becomes more worth it for you to hold off and to start receiving your Social Security in age 70, which gives you for every year that you postpone an increase of 8% in the final amount that you get. Now, for some people, it might be a matter of determining whether you need the Social Security as income in those earlier years. And then also just looking at your own family history, your own longevity, and really kind of determining where you see your own life expectancy falling, and just making an informed decision around that.
So if you can afford to wait, it's worth it to wait.
Right.
But if you're sacrificing and suffering or changing your lifestyle in a negative way by waiting, you might want to at least consider taking it earlier if that's your circumstance, right? And so
Right.
this is an area where I think it's really good to work with a planner, right? If you're not
Mhm.
sure which way to go, and
Right.
get someone's advice on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Another area to really be conscious and think about is neglecting healthcare planning. As we alluded to earlier, a little bit around the topic of budget, healthcare costs are increasing at much higher than the average inflation rate. It's increasing at a much, much higher rate than inflation. So really planning, learning around the Medicare opportunities, Medicare supplemental insurance that's available, and making an annual assessment. Sometimes the plans change, the coverages change from year to year. So ensuring that you're educating yourself, making an annual renewal if you're eligible, open and participate in HSAs or health savings accounts. Those allow you to put aside tax-free money. That money is allowed to grow tax-free, and it's removed tax-free if used for appropriate medical expenses. So those are other areas to really keep in mind around the healthcare planning.
Yeah, I think that's really good, Cheri. Those are good comments. I would put in a plug here for also not neglecting your health, right? And so by
Yes,
being healthy
absolutely.
and eating healthy, you might be able to reduce your healthcare expenses as well and
Right.
increase your longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last area, Cary, is not having a withdrawal strategy. So by not really being intentional around where you're pulling your funds throughout your retirement, in what order and from what accounts, you increase the risk of perhaps running out, or if nothing else, of paying more in taxes than you really needed to. So this is really an area of opportunity when working with an advisor who can really help you to identify those optimal ways and the optimal order that you want to pull from in ensuring that you are getting the maximum. Another is to ensure that you are following and taking your RMDs when necessary, so that you ensure that you avoid any penalties or anything like that.
So,
So
we often talk about asset allocation, but here's one where we
yes,
talk a little bit about asset location, right?
right,
And so depending on
yes,
what account the funds are in and how they're performing and other factors, as well as long-term or short-term capital gains, there's a lot of factors to consider here.
okay,
And this is definitely an area where I think if you're not working with a financial planner and you don't have a solid strategy that's optimized to
yeah,
reduce taxes, but also give you the income that you need. This is a good one to work with a planner.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great
So
points.
those are the primary areas, Cary, that people just really want to be conscious of and ensure that they're making good decisions during this period of time.
Okay, so if you're in the red zone or nearing the red zone, these are some things that you can do to avoid some of the mistakes that can mess up your retirement plans, or maybe even have you work longer than you wanted to, or
Yeah.
whatever the impacts might be. But if you found value in this topic, you can sign up for our newsletter. We have topics where we go into great depth like this every month. And you can sign up for that newsletter at clientfirstcapital.com. And you can sign up for a newsletter. You can also learn more about what we do and how we serve our clients and the services that we offer. And I'm just going to correct myself right now. I'm not perfect, but it's
All
clientfirstcap.com,
right.
not
Yes.
capital. So please reach out to us.
Thank you.